Rain hammered against the windows of the Bennett house, turning the evening sky into a blur of gray and black. Thunder rumbled across the small town. On his knees in the kitchen, 10-year-old Marcus Johnson scrubbed at a greasy stain on the floor. The smell of bleach burned his nose. His fingers were red from cleaning products. His back ached from bending over for hours. Behind him, laughter echoed from the living room. They don't usually call him by name. They call him Boy. But what they don't know is that around his neck hangs a silver locket. And inside that locket is a secret connected to a Korean billionaire who just came into the town. A man who has spent 20 years trying to forget the past until today. Because the moment he sees that locket, everything changes. The television glowed brightly as Ethan Bennett and his younger sister, Lily, stretched comfortably across the couch. Pizza boxes covered the coffee table. A popular Korean variety show played on the large screen, filling the room with cheerful music and laughter. Marcus glanced toward the doorway for only a second. A second was enough. The sharp crack of Cynthia Bennett's hand slamming onto the dining table made him jump. "Move faster, boy," she snapped. Marcus lowered his eyes immediately. "Yes, ma'am." Cynthia folded her arms. "You're here because nobody wants you. The least you can do is make yourself useful." Marcus nodded quietly. He had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. The woman turned away with a disgusted sigh. To anyone visiting the house, Cynthia Bennett appeared kind and respectable. She volunteered at community events. She attended church every Sunday. She posted smiling family photographs online. But behind closed doors, Marcus knew a different version of her. A version no one seemed willing to see. As he continued scrubbing, his fingers brushed against the silver locket hanging from his neck. Instinctively, he held it. The metal felt cool against his skin. It was old and scratched from years of wear. His earliest memory was of that locket. He didn't remember receiving it. He simply remembered always having it. Whenever he felt lonely, frightened, or forgotten, he would hold it and wonder about the woman who had given it to him. His mother. The woman everyone said had abandoned him. The woman he barely remembered. Thunder shook the house again. Marcus swallowed hard and returned to cleaning. By the time he finished, Ethan and Lily had already left the living room. The pizza boxes remained. The empty soda bottles, likewise dirty dishes, remained. And, as always, Marcus was expected to deal with all of it. He carried the dishes into the kitchen and began washing them. Outside, rainwater streamed down the windows. Inside, exhaustion settled deep into his bones. 10 years old. And already tired of life. When Marcus had first arrived at the Bennett house 3 years earlier, he believed foster care would be temporary. Caseworkers had promised he would be safe. They had promised people would help him. They had promised he would be cared for until things got better. Instead, every year seemed to get worse. The Bennetts weren't interested in raising children. They were interested in collecting checks. Marcus wasn't the only foster child in the home. There were others. Children who came and went. Some stayed for months. Some stayed for years. All of them learned the same lesson. The adults who were supposed to protect them rarely listened. Marcus finished the dishes and wiped down the counters. Then he moved to the laundry room. A mountain of clothes waited for him. Most belonged to the Bennett family. He sorted them carefully. Whites, colors. School uniforms, work clothes. By the time he finished loading the machines, it was nearly 10 p.m. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten dinner. There had been leftover pizza. But Cynthia had told him it wasn't for him. Marcus opened the refrigerator and found a small container holding plain rice from the previous night. He smiled slightly. At least there was something. As he lifted the container, a voice interrupted him. "What are you doing?" Harold Bennett stood in the doorway. Tall and broad-shouldered, Harold carried an expression that always made Marcus nervous. "I was getting something to eat, sir." Harold frowned. "You finished everything?" "Yes, sir." "The laundry?" "Yes, sir." "The dishes?" "Yes, sir." Harold stared at him for several uncomfortable seconds. Then he shrugged. "Fine." Marcus released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Harold walked away. Only then did Marcus eat. Cold rice. No seasoning. No meat. No vegetables. But he was grateful for it. Because gratitude was safer than disappointment. Later that night, Marcus climbed the narrow staircase leading to the attic room where he slept. The room had once been used for storage. Old boxes lined the walls. A single bed sat beneath a small window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Marcus sat on the mattress and pulled the silver locket from beneath his shirt. He examined the familiar engraving. A phoenix wrapped around an African shield. The design fascinated him. None of the other children had jewelry like it. Sometimes he imagined it belonged to a king. Other times he imagined it was a secret treasure. The truth was simpler. It was all he had left. He opened the locket. Inside was a faded photograph. The picture had become worn over the years. The face was difficult to see clearly. But Marcus knew who it was. His mother, Amina Johnson. He stared at her image. "Why did you leave me?" he whispered. The question escaped before he could stop it. No answer came. Only the sound of rain. Marcus closed the locket and lay down. Sleep came slowly. When it finally arrived, it carried familiar dreams. Dreams of a woman whose face he couldn't fully remember. Dreams of warm arms. Dreams of laughter. Dreams that vanished every morning. The next day brought school. Marcus walked through the halls carrying books that had been passed down through several students before reaching him. Some classmates ignored him. Others mocked him. A few were kind. But none truly knew what happened after he went home. His homeroom teacher noticed the bruise near his wrist. "Marcus, what happened there?" Marcus hesitated. "I fell." The teacher studied him carefully. For a moment, hope flickered inside him. Maybe she knew. Maybe she would ask more questions. Maybe she would help. Instead, she nodded. "Be more careful." And just like that, the moment passed. Another chance gone. Another adult looking away. During lunch, Marcus sat alone beneath a tree near the schoolyard. The silver locket rested in his palm. He traced the engraved phoenix with his thumb. A shadow appeared beside him. It was Lily Bennett. Marcus stiffened. The 14-year-old rarely spoke to him when other students were nearby. Today she looked unusually nervous. "What do you want?" Marcus asked quietly. Lily glanced around. Then she reached into her backpack. "I brought you this." She handed him a wrapped sandwich. Marcus blinked. "What?" "Just take it." "Why?" Lily avoided his eyes. "Because you never get enough food." Before he could respond, she walked away. Marcus stared at the sandwich. For a moment, he didn't know what to think. Lily wasn't cruel like her parents. She never defended him. But she wasn't cruel. Sometimes he caught her watching when Cynthia yelled at him. Sometimes she looked guilty, as though she knew something was wrong but didn't know how to stop it. Marcus carefully unwrapped the sandwich. It felt like the first act of kindness he'd received in weeks. That evening, another caseworker visited the Bennett home. Marcus recognized her immediately. Mrs. Parker. She had visited several times before. Each visit followed the same pattern. Questions. Smiles. Paperwork. Departure. No change. No improvement. No rescue. The adults sat in the living room discussing Marcus as though he weren't present. "He's doing very well," Cynthia said warmly. "We treat him like family." Mrs. Parker smiled. "That's wonderful to hear." Marcus stood quietly near the doorway. Family. The word almost made him laugh. Mrs. Parker finally turned toward him. "Marcus, how are things going?" The answer sat on the tip of his tongue. "Bad. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm scared. Please help me." Instead, Harold's eyes locked onto him. A silent warning. Marcus lowered his gaze. "I'm okay." The caseworker smiled. "Wonderful." Within 20 minutes she was gone. Marcus watched her car disappear down the street. Another opportunity lost. Another door closed. That night, unable to sleep, Marcus sat beside the attic window. Moonlight spilled across the room. He pulled the silver locket from his neck again. Something felt different. The hinge seemed loose. Curious, he examined it more closely. Marcus discovers the newspaper clipping hidden inside the main compartment of the locket. However, when he unfolds the clipping, he notices something strange. The inside metal lining appears unusually thick, almost as if another layer exists beneath it. He tries to pry it open but fails. Eventually, he gives up. He assumed it's simply part of the locket's design. Inside lay a tiny folded piece of newspaper. With trembling hands, Marcus removed it. The paper was yellowed with age. Carefully, he unfolded it. A headline stared back at him. Local woman convicted in major fraud case. Beneath the headline was a photograph. Marcus's breath caught. The woman in the picture was his mother, Amina Johnson. His eyes widened as he scanned the article. Convicted. Sentenced. Imprisoned. The words blurred together. For years he had believed she abandoned him. For years everyone had told him she chose to leave. Tears filled his eyes. But the article told a different story. She hadn't disappeared. She had been taken away. Then Marcus noticed something written on the back of the clipping. The handwriting was faded, uneven, desperate. He recognized it instantly. A mother's hand speaking across years of silence. Marcus, I never abandoned you. Before we reveal what happens next, don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you love dramatic storytelling. And if you think someone else would enjoy this story, share it with them. They might thank you later. Now, let's uncover the truth. His hands shook. He continued reading. I will come back. For a long moment, the world seemed to stop. The rain, the house, the loneliness. Everything faded. Because for the first time in years, Marcus realized something extraordinary. His mother had not chosen to leave him. She had been forced away. And somewhere beyond the darkness that surrounded his life, the truth was waiting to be found. Marcus read the message again. And again. And again. Each time, the words felt more real. I never abandoned you. For years, he had carried anger toward a woman he barely remembered. Whenever other children talked about their parents, Marcus would pretend he didn't care. Whenever he saw mothers picking up their children from school, he would tell himself it didn't matter. But deep inside, a question had always haunted him. Why wasn't he worth staying for? Now that question had been shattered. His mother hadn't walked away. She had been taken away. Marcus wiped tears from his cheeks and carefully folded the newspaper clipping. For the first time in years, he felt something he almost didn't recognize. Hope. He returned the clipping to the hidden compartment and closed the locket. Then he lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Who had hidden the newspaper inside? Why hadn't anyone told him the truth? And most importantly, where was his mother now? Sleep refused to come. The questions kept circling through his mind until dawn. The next morning, Marcus woke before everyone else. That was normal. The Bennetts expected him to prepare breakfast before the rest of the household got out of bed. He quietly descended the stairs and entered the kitchen. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Sunlight spilled across the neighborhood. The town sat along the outskirts of a growing district where African and Korean communities had blended over the years. Korean-owned businesses stood beside African-owned restaurants. Street signs appeared in both English and Korean. Marcus had grown up surrounded by both cultures. His favorite food was jollof rice. His favorite television shows were Korean dramas. His mother had once taught him a few Korean phrases when he was very young, though he remembered only fragments now. As he cracked eggs into a bowl, he wondered if she had ever thought about him. Was she still alive? Did she know where he was? The thought stayed with him all morning. By the time the family gathered for breakfast, Marcus had prepared everything. Eggs, toast, fruit, coffee. Harold sat at the table and immediately frowned. Why are these eggs cold? Marcus blinked. I just finished cooking them. They're cold. Harold shoved the plate away. Cynthia rolled her eyes. You can't do anything right. Marcus lowered his gaze. The eggs weren't cold. Everyone knew they weren't cold. But arguing would only make things worse. Ethan smirked from across the table. Marcus silently collected the plate and reheated it. No one thanked him. No one ever did. After school that afternoon, Marcus was assigned another list of chores. Vacuum the house. Wash dishes. Fold laundry. Clean bathrooms. Organize storage boxes. The list seemed endless. As he worked, he thought about the message hidden inside the locket. A strange determination had begun growing inside him. For years he had accepted everything people told him. Accepted that he was unwanted. Accepted that he was alone. Accepted that no one was coming. Now he wasn't so sure. The truth mattered. And somehow he intended to find it. Late that evening, while carrying laundry upstairs, Marcus overheard voices coming from Harold's office. The door was slightly open. Normally, he would keep walking. But one sentence made him stop. "We can't afford another investigation." The voice belonged to Harold. Marcus froze. A second voice answered. "Then make sure the children stay quiet." Harold sighed. "They won't talk." "They'd better not." Marcus carefully stepped closer. The second voice sounded unfamiliar. A man. Older. Confident. Almost threatening. "You've already received enough money to keep things under control," the man continued. "There can't be any mistakes." "Money?" Marcus frowned. The floorboard beneath his foot creaked. Instantly, the conversation stopped. His heart nearly stopped with it. The office door swung open. Harold appeared. His expression darkened. "What are you doing?" Marcus swallowed. "I was taking laundry upstairs." Harold stared at him. For several uncomfortable seconds, neither spoke. Then Harold grabbed the basket from Marcus's hands. "Go finish your chores." Marcus hurried away. But even as he climbed the stairs, the words echoed in his mind. Investigation. Money. Children stay quiet. Something about the conversation felt wrong. Very wrong. The following week brought another reminder of how invisible Marcus had become. At school, students were asked to create family projects. Most children seemed excited. Marcus wasn't. The assignment required photographs, family history, memories, stories passed down through generations. Things Marcus didn't have. When the teacher handed him the project guidelines, she smiled. "I'm sure you'll do great." Marcus forced a smile back. But inside, he felt hollow. That evening he sat alone in the attic holding the paper instructions. Family history. The phrase felt almost cruel. The only family history he possessed was a newspaper clipping hidden inside a locket. As he stared at the assignment, an idea slowly formed. Maybe the project could help him. Maybe he could use it as an excuse to learn more about his mother. The next day, during lunch break, Marcus visited the school library. The librarian greeted him warmly. "Research project?" Marcus nodded. "I'm trying to find information about someone." The librarian smiled. "Who?" "My mother." The words felt strange coming out loud. She guided him toward old newspaper archives stored on the library computers. Marcus typed a name into the search bar. Amina Johnson. Dozens of results appeared. His pulse quickened. Most were old articles. Many discussed the fraud case mentioned in the clipping. Marcus opened the first article. Then another. Then another. The more he read, the more confused he became. The reports described Amina as a criminal mastermind responsible for financial fraud involving community investment programs. Yet the articles felt incomplete. Certain details were missing. Witness names were absent. Evidence descriptions were vague. Entire sections seemed strangely rushed. Marcus wasn't old enough to understand legal procedures. But even he sensed something didn't fit. Amina's photograph appeared repeatedly. In every image, she looked frightened rather than guilty. As he studied one article, a sentence caught his attention. Case prosecuted by attorney Richard Cole. Marcus quietly repeated the name. Richard Cole. Something about it felt important. He wrote it down. When the lunch period ended, Marcus reluctantly returned to class. But his curiosity continued growing. For the first time, he wasn't simply surviving. He was searching. Searching for answers. Searching for truth. Searching for the mother who had promised she would come back. Days passed. Then weeks. Life at the Bennett house remained difficult. The chores continued. The insults continued. The loneliness continued. But something inside Marcus had changed. He no longer believed the story everyone had given him. and that made enduring each day slightly easier. One Saturday morning, Cynthia announced that several guests would be visiting. The house needed to look perfect. As usual, Marcus became responsible for making that happen. By noon he had cleaned nearly every room. When visitors finally arrived, Marcus recognized several people from church and community organizations. The Bennetts greeted everyone with warm smiles. They laughed. They shook hands. They spoke proudly about fostering children. Marcus watched from the kitchen. The performance disgusted him. These people saw only what the Bennetts wanted them to see. None of them knew what happened after the guests left. None of them knew how foster children were treated inside the house. As the afternoon continued, Marcus carried trays of drinks between rooms. One visitor stopped him. An elderly Korean woman with kind eyes. "What is your name?" she asked. "Marcus." "How old are you?" 10. She smiled gently. "You seem like a very good boy." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond. People rarely spoke to him that way. The woman reached into her purse and handed him a small wrapped candy. "Don't work too hard." Before he could thank her, Cynthia appeared. Her smile tightened immediately. "Marcus, stop bothering the guests." The elderly woman frowned slightly. "He wasn't bothering me." But Cynthia was already steering Marcus away. The message was clear. Know your place. Later that evening, after the visitors left, Marcus found the candy still in his pocket. He stared at it for several seconds. Then he smiled. 2 acts of kindness in 1 month. Lily's sandwich. A stranger's candy. It wasn't much. But it reminded him that not everyone in the world was cruel. That realization became even more important 3 days later. Because something happened that changed everything. Marcus returned from school to find Cynthia and Harold arguing in the kitchen. They didn't notice him at first. "You're getting careless," Cynthia hissed. "I'm handling it." "No, you're not." Harold slammed a drawer shut. "We've been doing this for years." Marcus froze near the doorway. Again, the conversation felt dangerous. Again, words surfaced that made no sense. Years. Handling it. Careless. Then Cynthia lowered her voice. One complaint reaches the wrong person, and everything falls apart. Marcus's heartbeat quickened. "Complaint? What complaint?" Before he could hear more, Ethan entered the kitchen. The conversation stopped instantly. Harold noticed Marcus. "Why are you standing there?" Marcus quickly looked away. "Sorry." He retreated toward the stairs. But the pieces were beginning to connect. The Bennetts were hiding something. Something large enough to make them afraid. Something involving foster children. Something involving money. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Marcus felt as though he was standing near the edge of a much bigger secret. A secret connected not only to the Bennett family, but somehow to his mother as well. That night, Marcus sat by the attic window once more. The silver locket rested in his hand. Moonlight reflected across its worn surface. "I'll find out what happened," he whispered. The words were meant for his mother. A promise carried across years of silence. Below him, the Bennett house stood quiet. But Marcus no longer saw it as merely a place of suffering. It was becoming something else. A place filled with hidden truths. A place where masks covered ugly realities. A place where secrets were slowly beginning to surface. And somewhere beyond those secrets, beyond the lies and the loneliness, a path was beginning to open. Marcus couldn't see where it would lead. He couldn't imagine the powerful people whose lives would soon collide with his own. He didn't know that a Korean billionaire named Jae-won Choi was only weeks away from entering his world. He didn't know that the silver locket hanging around his neck would soon attract the attention of people connected to his past. He didn't know that his search for answers was about to become far more dangerous than he ever imagined. All he knew was this: his mother had not abandoned him. And for the first time in years, Marcus had something worth fighting for. 3 weeks later, the storm arrived. Dark clouds swallowed the afternoon sky long before sunset. Strong winds rattled windows throughout town, and shop owners hurried to pull in outdoor signs before the weather worsened. Marcus stood beneath the covered entrance of a small grocery store clutching 2 paper bags. Cynthia had sent him out alone. Again. The errand list had been long. Rice, cooking oil, bread, cleaning supplies, laundry detergent. The bags were heavy, but Marcus was used to carrying more than most children his age. Thunder rumbled overhead. A few customers rushed toward their vehicles as the first drops of rain began falling. Marcus adjusted the bags in his arms and started walking home. Within minutes, the storm unleashed itself. Rain crashed onto the streets. Vehicles slowed. Storefront signs swayed violently in the wind. Marcus hurried along the sidewalk, trying to protect the groceries from getting soaked. Then he heard it. A loud mechanical grinding sound. He looked toward the road. A black luxury SUV had rolled to a stop near an intersection. The vehicle looked expensive enough to buy several houses. Its hazard lights flashed repeatedly. For a moment, Marcus simply watched. Several adults noticed the stranded vehicle. Some glanced at it. Others ignored it completely. Everyone continued on their way. The rain intensified. The SUV remained motionless. Marcus shifted the grocery bags. Part of him wanted to keep walking. If he returned home late, Cynthia would be angry. If the groceries got wet, Harold would blame him. If anything went wrong, he would pay the price. Still, something about the situation bothered him. The driver was stranded in the middle of a storm, and nobody seemed willing to help. Marcus sighed. Then he changed direction. Water splashed beneath his shoes as he crossed the street. The closer he got, the more impressive the vehicle appeared. Its windows were tinted dark. Its body gleamed despite the rain. Marcus approached cautiously. The driver's door suddenly opened. A tall Korean man stepped out. He appeared to be in his early 40s. His black overcoat was already soaked by the rain. The man looked frustrated. Not angry. Not arrogant. Just frustrated. He examined the vehicle briefly before noticing Marcus standing nearby. For several seconds, they simply stared at each other. Marcus spoke first. "Is your car broken?" The man blinked. Then a small smile appeared. "That is a very accurate observation." Marcus shrugged. "It looks broken." The man laughed softly. The reaction surprised Marcus. Most adults rarely laughed around him. "Yes," the man admitted. "It appears my vehicle has decided to stop cooperating." Marcus glanced around. No one came to help? The man looked toward the busy street. Apparently not. Several cars passed by. None stopped. None even slowed. Marcus frowned. That didn't seem right. He carefully placed the grocery bags beneath a nearby awning. Then he removed the old umbrella he carried. It wasn't much. The fabric had been patched multiple times. The handle was slightly crooked, but it still worked. Marcus held it out. "You can use this." The man looked genuinely surprised. "What about you?" "I'll be okay." Rainwater dripped from Marcus's hair. The billionaire stared at the umbrella, then at the child offering it. For reasons he couldn't explain, the simple gesture affected him more than expected. He had spent years surrounded by powerful people. Executives, politicians, investors, celebrities. Yet a child with almost nothing was showing him more kindness than most adults he encountered. The man accepted the umbrella. "Thank you." Marcus nodded. "You should stand over there." He pointed toward the awning. "Less rain." The man followed him. Together they sheltered beside the small grocery store. For a few moments, neither spoke. Then the stranger extended his hand. "My name is Jae-won Choi." Marcus shook it carefully. "I'm Marcus." "Nice to meet you, Marcus." The boy nodded. "You too." Jae-won studied him. There was something unusual about the child. Not his appearance. Not his clothes. It was his attitude. Most children his age would have been curious about the expensive vehicle. They would have asked questions, taken pictures, bragged to friends. Marcus seemed completely uninterested in any of that. Instead, his attention remained focused on whether a stranger needed help. That alone impressed Jae-won. "What are you doing out here during a storm?" Jae-won asked. "Getting groceries." "For your family?" Marcus hesitated. A small pause. Barely noticeable. But Jae-won caught it. "Yeah." Something about the answer felt incomplete. Before Jae-won could ask another question, Marcus reached into one of the grocery bags. He removed a bottle of water. "Here." Jae-won blinked. What? You look thirsty. For a moment, the billionaire simply stared. The bottle was inexpensive. Ordinary. Probably purchased with money Marcus didn't even own himself. Yet the gesture carried a sincerity impossible to buy. Slowly, J1 accepted it. Thank you. Marcus shrugged. No problem. J1 shook his head in disbelief. This is becoming embarrassing. Marcus looked confused. What is? You have helped me 3 times. The boy thought for a moment. Then he smiled. A genuine smile. Small but sincere. Maybe next time you can help someone else. The words struck J1 unexpectedly. Simple. Honest. Powerful. For years, business magazines had described J1 Choi as one of the most ruthless executives in Asia. His construction empire operated across multiple continents. Governments negotiated with him. Corporations competed against him. Billions of dollars moved at his command. Yet, standing beside a grocery store during a storm, he felt humbled by a 10-year-old boy. A vibration interrupted the moment. J1 glanced at his phone. His security team. Finally. Looks like help is coming, he said. Marcus nodded. Good. A black sedan appeared moments later. 2 men in suits exited immediately. Their expressions showed visible concern. Mr. Choi, we've been looking everywhere. Are you all right? Marcus's eyes widened slightly. These weren't ordinary employees. The way they spoke made it obvious. Who exactly was this man? J1 smiled. I'm fine. One of the security personnel looked toward Marcus. Who is this? Before anyone could answer, Marcus lifted his grocery bags. I should go. J1 nodded. Thank you again. Marcus turned to leave. Then something happened. As he adjusted the bags, the silver locket slipped from beneath his shirt. It swung briefly in the air. The engraved symbol caught the light. And J1's world stopped. His eyes locked onto the necklace. The smile vanished from his face. His breathing slowed. Impossible. The billionaire took a step forward. Marcus. The boy paused. Yeah. J1's gaze remained fixed on the locket. The phoenix. The shield. Every detail was unmistakable. 20 years had passed. Yet he recognized it instantly. Because he had seen it before. A long time ago. In another country. During another life. Where did you get that? J1 asked quietly. Marcus touched the necklace instinctively. This? Yes. Marcus frowned. It belonged to my mom. J1's pulse quickened. Your mother gave it to you? I think so. The billionaire stared. Memories flooded back with startling force. A burning vehicle. Smoke. Screaming. Broken glass. And a man charging through flames without hesitation. A man wearing that exact symbol around his neck. The same phoenix. The same African shield. The same locket. For years, J1 had believed he would never see it again. Yet here it was. Around the neck of a child. His voice became softer. What is your last name? Johnson. The answer hit like lightning. J1's eyes widened. Johnson. No. It couldn't be. Could it? Marcus Johnson? The boy nodded. Yeah. J1's mind raced. Only one person connected to that symbol had ever mattered so deeply. Only one man had worn it. Only one man had changed the course of his life forever. A man named David Johnson. The stranger who had saved him. The hero nobody remembered. The man J1 had spent years trying to find after the accident. A man who had vanished before receiving any recognition. J1's heart pounded. Marcus. The billionaire struggled to keep his composure. Did your father happen to be named David Johnson? The grocery bags nearly slipped from Marcus's hands. His eyes widened. How do you know that name? The question confirmed everything. J1 felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. 20 years. 20 years of unanswered questions. 20 years of searching. And now fate had placed David Johnson's son directly in front of him. In the middle of a storm. On an ordinary afternoon. Neither of them spoke. Rain continued falling around them. Traffic continued moving. The world continued turning. But for J1 Choi, everything had changed. Because standing before him wasn't just a kind-hearted child. Wasn't just a boy carrying groceries. Wasn't just a stranger. This was the son of the man who had once saved his life. And for the first time in 20 years, Jae-won finally had a trail leading back to the hero he had never forgotten. Jae-won Choi did not believe in coincidences. Not anymore. Years of building a global business empire had taught him that every outcome had a cause, every success had a strategy, and every mystery had an answer waiting to be uncovered. Yet as his sedan carried him away from the storm-soaked town, he found himself staring out the window in silence. Marcus Johnson. The name refused to leave his mind. Neither did the silver locket. The image of the engraved phoenix wrapped around an African shield replayed over and over inside his head. By the time he arrived at his hotel, Jae-won had already made a decision. He needed answers. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Immediately. His chief of security, Kang Min-ho, followed him into the penthouse suite. The veteran investigator had worked for Jae-won for nearly 15 years and understood his employer better than most people, which was why he immediately noticed something unusual. "You've been quiet," Min-ho said. Jae-won loosened his tie. "I met someone today." Min-ho raised an eyebrow. "Important." Jae-won looked directly at him. A boy named Marcus Johnson. The reaction was immediate. Min-ho knew that surname. For years, he had heard stories about the man Jae-won had never stopped searching for. David Johnson. The stranger who had saved his life. "The same Johnson?" Min-ho asked carefully. Jae-won nodded. "I believe he's David's son." Silence filled the room. Even Min-ho appeared stunned. After a moment, Jae-won walked toward the window overlooking the city lights. "I want everything." "What exactly are we looking for?" "Marcus." Jae-won's expression hardened. His family. His foster parents. His mother. Everyone connected to him. Min-ho understood immediately. A full investigation. One of the billionaire's most powerful resources. "I'll assemble a team." Tonight. Within an hour, 6 investigators had been assigned to the case. By midnight, information was already beginning to arrive. At first, the reports seemed ordinary. Marcus Johnson, 10 years old. Placed in foster care several years earlier. Mother incarcerated. Father deceased. Current residents. Harold and Cynthia Bennett. But as investigators dug deeper, troubling details began appearing. Then disturbing details. Then horrifying details. By the second day, Min-ho entered Jae-won's office carrying a thick folder. His expression was grim. "What is it?" Jae-won asked. The investigator placed the file on the desk. "I think we have a problem." Jae-won opened the folder. Financial statements. Government records. Foster care documentation. Photographs. Witness notes. His eyes narrowed as he reviewed the information. Then he stopped. "What am I looking at?" Min-ho folded his arms. The Bennett family currently receives government payments for 6 foster children. Jae-won looked up. 6? Yes. The billionaire frowned. "That's a significant amount of money." Min-ho nodded. "Very significant." Jae-won's gaze returned to the documents. The numbers were shocking. Thousands upon thousands of dollars collected over several years. Money intended to support vulnerable children. Money intended for food, education, clothing, healthcare. Instead, the children appeared to be receiving almost none of it. Jae-won's expression darkened. "Keep going." Min-ho opened another section of the file. "We interviewed former foster children who previously lived with the Bennetts." "What did they say?" The investigator hesitated. Not because he lacked information. Because the information was difficult to hear. They described conditions similar to forced labor. Jae-won's jaw tightened. "Explain." The children cooked, cleaned, maintained the property, cared for younger foster children, handled household chores for hours each day. The room grew silent. Min-ho continued. Several reported verbal abuse. Some reported physical punishment. Most said they were afraid to speak to caseworkers. Jae-won's hands slowly clenched. A familiar anger was beginning to rise. The kind of anger he rarely showed. The kind that usually ended careers. Or destroyed companies. "What evidence do we have?" Min-ho slid additional photographs across the desk. "More than enough." The first image showed hidden cameras investigators had secretly installed near public areas surrounding the property. The footage revealed foster children performing nearly all household labor. The second image displayed financial records. Payments received. Expenses reported. Spending discrepancies. The third folder contained testimonies. Former foster children. Neighbors. Teachers. Even local shop owners. One statement stood out. A former foster child had written, "They treated us like employees they didn't have to pay." Jae-won closed the folder. Slowly. Carefully. Because if he closed it any faster, he might tear it apart. Marcus is living in that house? Yes. The billionaire stood. His voice became cold. Dangerously cold. They're exploiting children. Minho nodded. That appears to be exactly what's happening. Jae-won walked toward the window. For several moments he said nothing. Then he spoke. "Keep digging." Minho frowned. "There may already be enough for authorities." "Not yet." The investigator understood. Jae-won wasn't interested in assumptions. He wanted the entire truth. Every piece. Every connection. Every secret. And soon enough, another secret emerged. One far more shocking than the first. 3 days later, Minho returned with a new file. This time his expression looked even worse. Jae-won immediately noticed. "What happened?" The investigator sat down. "You need to see this." He handed over several documents. Jae-won scanned the first page. Then the second. Then the third. His eyes narrowed. A name appeared repeatedly. Richard Cole. The billionaire leaned back slowly. Who is Richard Cole? A powerful attorney. Local? Regional? Minho slid another photograph across the desk. Connected. Influential. Very expensive. Jae-won continued reading. Then his eyes suddenly stopped. The air seemed to leave the room. What is this? Minho already knew the page. Because it had stunned him as well. The document showed court records from years earlier. Records connected to Amina Johnson, Marcus's mother, and listed among the legal personnel involved in her conviction was Richard Cole. Jae-won stared at the name, then looked at Minho. The same Richard Cole? Yes. The answer landed like a hammer. The billionaire's mind immediately connected the pieces. Harold Bennett, Richard Cole, Amina Johnson, Marcus. None of it felt accidental anymore. Explain the connection. Minho opened another folder. We discovered multiple financial interactions between Harold Bennett and entities linked to Richard Cole. Jae-won's eyes hardened. What kind of interactions? Payments. Transfers. Consultation agreements. The billionaire frowned. Why would a foster parent need a high-powered attorney? That's exactly the question we're asking. More documents appeared. More records. More transactions. The deeper investigators looked, the worse things became. One name appeared repeatedly throughout the archived files. Victor Kong. The name immediately caught Jae-won's attention. A faint sense of familiarity stirred in the back of his mind. He knew he had encountered the name before. Somewhere. Years ago. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't immediately place it. For now, the connection remained unclear. Still, Jae-won made a note of it. Because names rarely appeared that often by accident. Eventually, a disturbing pattern emerged. Richard Cole had not simply participated in Amina Johnson's conviction. Evidence suggested he may have helped orchestrate it. Jae-won stared at the reports. You're telling me Marcus's foster father is connected to the lawyer who prosecuted his mother? Yes. The room fell silent. Nothing about that felt random. Nothing. A slow realization settled over both men. The possibility was terrifying. What if Amina Johnson hadn't merely been convicted? What if she had been framed? The thought changed everything. Because if Amina was innocent, then Marcus's entire life had been stolen. His childhood. His family. His future. All because someone wanted her removed. Jae-won's expression darkened further. Find proof. We're trying. No. The billionaire's voice became sharper. Find proof. Minho nodded immediately. He understood. The investigation was no longer about curiosity. It had become personal. Very personal. That evening, after everyone left, Jae-won remained alone in his office. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass windows. Yet his attention drifted somewhere else. Somewhere 20 years in the past. Back to a day he had spent years trying to forget. And years trying to understand. A memory surfaced. A university campus abroad. A younger version of himself. Ambitious. Determined. Certain the world belonged to him. He was 22 years old. Studying overseas. Driving home after a late evening gathering. Then everything changed. The accident happened in seconds. A truck ran a red light. Metal collided violently. Glass exploded. His vehicle spun out of control. When it finally stopped, smoke filled the cabin. Jaewon remembered panic. Pain. Heat. He remembered trying to open the door. It wouldn't move. The impact had trapped him inside. Then flames appeared. Small at first. Growing rapidly. People gathered nearby. Some watched. Some called for help. Nobody approached. Nobody wanted to risk entering a burning vehicle. Nobody except one man. David Johnson. Jaewon could still see him clearly. Tall. Strong. Fearless. The stranger had ignored the danger entirely. Ignoring the fire. Ignoring the risk. Ignoring the possibility of death. He simply acted. David smashed a window. Reached inside. Dragged Jaewon free moments before the vehicle became engulfed in flames. The explosion happened less than a minute later. If David had arrived any later, Jaewon would have died. The memory remained vivid even now. The screaming. The smoke. The heat. And the stranger who refused to leave him behind. Yet after saving his life, David disappeared. No interviews. No rewards. No recognition. Nothing. By the time Jaewon recovered and began searching, David was gone. For years he looked. For years he asked questions. For years he followed dead ends. Then eventually, the trail vanished completely. Now he finally knew why. Because David Johnson had never been avoiding recognition. He had been running out of time. The next morning, investigators delivered another report. One sentence immediately caught Jaewon's attention. David Johnson deceased 11 months after Marcus Johnson's birth. The billionaire read the line twice. Then a third time. A heavy silence settled over him. David was gone. Gone before Marcus could even know him. Gone before receiving gratitude. Gone before seeing his son grow up. For several moments, Jaewon simply stared at the page. Then he closed the file. Slowly. Respectfully. His thoughts returned to the boy standing in the rain. Offering an umbrella. Offering directions. Offering water. The kindness hadn't come from nowhere. Now he understood. Marcus carried his father's heart. The same courage. The same selflessness. The same instinct to help others before helping himself. The realization strengthened Jaewon's resolve. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a debt. A debt 20 years old. A debt he intended to repay. Because David Johnson had once saved his life. And now David's son was trapped inside a nightmare. Jaewon looked toward the city skyline. His reflection stared back from the glass. Determined. Focused. Unwavering. Somewhere across town, Marcus still believed he was alone. Still believed nobody powerful cared what happened to him. Still believed he had to fight this battle by himself. But that was about to change. Because the deeper Jaewon dug, the uglier the truth became. And the billionaire had reached a point where walking away was no longer possible. Someone had exploited children. Someone had hidden evidence. Someone had destroyed a family. And very soon, those people were going to learn what happened when a man with unlimited resources decided to uncover the truth. The first move came quietly. No press conferences. No public accusations. No dramatic announcements. Jaewon Choi had built a multi-billion-dollar empire by understanding one simple principle. The strongest attack is often the one your enemy never sees coming. 3 days after learning the truth about Marcus, Jaewon assembled a private meeting inside the conference room of his temporary headquarters. Around the table sat some of the most experienced professionals money could buy. Investigators. Forensic accountants. Child welfare specialists. Former prosecutors. Corporate intelligence analysts. Every person in the room had been chosen for a reason. Jae-won stood at the head of the table. A large screen behind him displayed photographs. Marcus Johnson, Amina Johnson, Harold Bennett, Cynthia Bennett, Richard Cole. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone understood the seriousness of the case. Jae-won folded his hands behind his back. I want facts. Nobody spoke. I don't want assumptions. Still silence. I don't want theories. The room remained focused. I want evidence that survives scrutiny. He pointed toward Harold Bennett's photograph. That man has spent years profiting from vulnerable children. His finger moved toward Richard Cole. That man may have helped destroy an innocent family. The room grew even quieter. Jae-won looked at every person individually. If they are guilty, we expose them. A pause. If they are innocent, we leave them alone. Several heads nodded. That was one reason people respected Jae-won. He was ruthless. But he wasn't reckless. The truth mattered. The meeting lasted nearly 4 hours. When it ended, a full-scale investigation was underway. And for the first time in years, powerful people were examining every corner of the Bennett family's life. What they found was devastating. Financial records revealed thousands of dollars allocated for foster children had disappeared into personal accounts. Receipts showed luxury purchases that had nothing to do with child welfare. Investigators documented inconsistencies stretching back years. Then came witness interviews. Former foster children began speaking. One testimony became 10. 10 became 20. Stories emerged with frightening consistency. Long hours of labor. Food restrictions. Verbal humiliation. Threats. Fear. Many of the children had believed nobody would ever listen. Now someone finally was. And the more they spoke, the stronger the case became. Meanwhile, Marcus remained completely unaware. His life continued as usual. Every morning he woke before sunrise. Every day he completed his chores. Every evening he returned to the attic room. But something had changed. He had started researching his mother whenever possible. The newspaper clipping had become his most treasured possession. Sometimes he read the message before going to sleep. Sometimes he read it after waking up. The words gave him strength. I never abandoned you. Those 4 words had become a lifeline. One afternoon, while Marcus was stacking boxes in the garage, Harold appeared unexpectedly. The foster father looked irritated. Why is this taking so long? Marcus glanced at the boxes. I'm almost finished. Almost isn't finished. Marcus lowered his head. Sorry. Harold stepped closer. Do you know how much we do for you? Marcus said nothing. We give you a home. Silence. We feed you. Silence. We take care of you. Marcus wanted to respond. Wanted to say none of those things were true. Wanted to ask why a child should have to earn basic kindness. But years of experience told him to remain quiet. Harold eventually walked away. Yet something unusual happened. For the first time, Marcus no longer believed him. Not completely. The lies were beginning to lose their power. Elsewhere, Jae-won's investigators uncovered a breakthrough. A former employee from a financial consulting firm agreed to cooperate. The woman provided records linking several suspicious transactions to accounts connected with Richard Cole. The money trail stretched back years. And buried within those transactions was something explosive. Payments made shortly before Amina Johnson's conviction. Minho stared at the documents in disbelief. Then he immediately delivered them to Jae-won. The billionaire reviewed every page personally. His expression darkened. These transfers don't make sense. They don't, Minho agreed. Jae-won pointed at a specific entry. Look at the timing. The payment had occurred just weeks before the trial. Another shortly after sentencing. Another several months later. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Somebody had benefited from Amina's downfall. The question was why. That answer arrived sooner than expected. Because another witness finally came forward. And what she revealed threatened to destroy everything. A retired administrative assistant who had once worked near Richard Cole's office contacted investigators anonymously. At first, she was terrified. She feared retaliation. She feared legal consequences. She feared powerful people. But after reviewing evidence from the investigation, she decided she could no longer remain silent. Her statement lasted nearly 3 hours. When it ended, the room was silent. According to her testimony, several documents connected to Amina Johnson's case had disappeared before trial. Evidence had been altered. Witness information had been withheld. Important records had never reached the defense. If her account proved accurate, Amina's conviction might have been built on manipulation from the very beginning. Jaewon listened carefully. Then he asked one question. "Can you prove it?" The woman nodded. And for the first time since the investigation began, genuine hope appeared. Because proof was exactly what they needed. Proof turned allegations into facts. Proof turned suspicions into cases. Proof changed lives. Over the following weeks, evidence continued accumulating. The walls around Harold Bennett and Richard Cole were beginning to crack. But neither man realized it yet. They believed they were untouchable. Protected by reputation. Protected by influence. Protected by years of getting away with everything. That confidence would soon become their greatest weakness. Meanwhile, another battle was quietly unfolding inside the Bennett household. Lily Bennett had started paying attention. More than usual. For years she had witnessed things she knew were wrong. Marcus being blamed unfairly. Marcus being overworked. Marcus being treated differently. At first, she convinced herself there was nothing she could do. Then she told herself adults knew best. Then she told herself it wasn't her business. But those excuses were becoming harder to believe. Especially when she saw Marcus sitting alone. Especially when she noticed how rarely he smiled. Especially when she overheard conversations that made her uncomfortable. One night, she stood outside her parents' bedroom door. Voices drifted through the wood. Harold sounded angry. Cynthia sounded nervous. People are asking questions. So what? You don't understand. A pause. Then Harold's voice lowered. If anyone talks, we're finished. Lily froze. Finished? Why would asking questions ruin them? For the first time, genuine fear entered her heart. Because deep down, she already knew the answer. People only fear questions when they are hiding something. And her parents were hiding a lot. Far more than she had ever imagined. Across town, Jaewon stood inside his office looking at a photograph. The picture showed David Johnson. One of the few investigators had managed to locate. The image was old. Faded. But the face was unmistakable. Jaewon stared at it quietly. 20 years. 20 years since the man had pulled him from a burning vehicle. 20 years since fate had connected their lives. Now fate had done it again. Only this time, the debt belonged to Jaewon. And he intended to pay every last cent of it. No matter how long it took. No matter how powerful the opposition became. No matter how ugly the truth turned out to be. Because the war had officially begun. And before it ended, secrets would be exposed. Families would be tested. Lies would collapse. And Marcus Johnson's life would never be the same again. The war escalated faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, Harold Bennett realized something was wrong. At first, it was small things. Former foster children refusing to return phone calls. Unexpected requests for financial documents. Questions from local authorities. Journalists contacting people connected to the family. Then came the moment that confirmed his worst fears. A certified legal notice arrived at the house. Harold read it once. Then twice. His face turned pale. Cynthia noticed immediately. What is it? Harold handed her the document. She scanned the page. Her eyes widened. This can't be happening. But it was. Someone with serious resources was investigating them. And not just casually. Systematically. Thoroughly. Relentlessly. The kind of investigation that destroyed lives. For the first time in years, Harold Bennett felt fear. Real fear. The kind that settled deep in the stomach and refused to leave. That night, the atmosphere inside the house became tense. Marcus noticed it immediately. The Bennetts argued behind closed doors. Phone calls happened at strange hours. Whispered conversations stopped whenever anyone entered the room. Something was happening. He didn't know what. But he could feel it. Even Ethan seemed nervous. Only Lily appeared different. Not nervous. Thoughtful. Observant. As if she were watching a puzzle slowly assemble itself. Meanwhile, inside a luxury office suite, Jae-won reviewed another mountain of evidence. The investigation had become enormous. Dozens of interviews. Thousands of pages of records. Hours of surveillance footage. Every day revealed something new. Every day exposed another lie. Minho entered carrying fresh reports. We've confirmed several financial irregularities. Jae-won looked up. How significant? Enough to trigger criminal investigations. The billionaire nodded. What about Richard Cole? Minho placed another folder on the desk. He's lawyered up. That wasn't surprising. Men like Richard Cole rarely panicked publicly. They prepared. They strategized. They fought. And Richard was already fighting. Over the next several days, legal letters began arriving. Threats. Warnings. Accusations. Richard's attorneys claimed the investigation was harassment. They accused witnesses of lying. They attacked the credibility of former foster children. They attempted to intimidate anyone cooperating. It was a familiar strategy. Discredit the victims. Protect the powerful. Unfortunately for them, they had chosen the wrong opponent. Jae-won barely reacted. After reading one particularly aggressive legal letter, he simply handed it back to Minho. File it. That's all. Jae-won shrugged. If they have facts, we'll address facts. His expression hardened. If all they have are threats, let them keep sending paper. Minho smiled slightly. That response was classic Jae-won. Calm. Cold. Unmoved. Outside the conference room, teams continued gathering evidence. And with every passing day, the pressure increased. Soon reporters began hearing rumors. A major foster care abuse investigation. Possible financial crimes. Questions surrounding an old conviction. The story had all the ingredients of a national scandal. By the end of the month, journalists were actively searching for answers. The public still knew very little. But curiosity was growing. And curiosity can be dangerous for people living behind lies. Back at the Bennett house, Harold's temper worsened. Every setback fueled his anger. Every phone call made him more irritable. Every new development made him more desperate. One evening, he exploded over something trivial. Marcus accidentally dropped a glass while setting the dinner table. The glass shattered. Silence filled the room. Harold stood abruptly. The force of the movement startled everyone. You can't do anything right. Marcus immediately stepped back. I'm sorry. The apology only made Harold angrier. Sorry. His voice echoed through the dining room. Do you think sorry fixes everything? Cynthia remained silent. Ethan stared at his plate. But Lily watched carefully. Very carefully. Something in her expression changed. Because she wasn't looking at Marcus. She was looking at her father. And for the first time, she seemed to see him clearly. Not as a parent. Not as a protector. But as a man losing control. That night, after everyone went to bed, Lily sat alone in her room. Her laptop rested on the desk. She stared at it for a long time. Then slowly opened a hidden folder. Dozens of files appeared. Audio recordings. Video clips. Dates. Times. Evidence. Years of evidence. Her hands trembled slightly. She had never planned to become a witness. The recordings had started accidentally years earlier. A school project had required her to learn basic video editing. One day she recorded an argument at home. Then another. Then another. Eventually she began saving them. Not because she intended to expose anyone. Because deep down, she knew something was wrong. Very wrong. And part of her feared nobody would believe it someday. Now she stared at the collection. Years of secrets. Years of truth. Years of things her parents never imagined anyone would hear. Lily closed her eyes. The decision terrified her. But the alternative terrified her more. Elsewhere, Jae-won's team finally achieved a major breakthrough. The retired administrative assistant provided archived records proving that critical evidence had disappeared during Amina Johnson's prosecution. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. For the first time, they possessed documentation that suggested deliberate manipulation. Not mistakes. Not negligence. Manipulation. Jae-won reviewed every page personally. When he finished, he leaned back slowly. How strong is this? Minho answered honestly. Strong enough to reopen questions. Strong enough to challenge the conviction? Possibly. The billionaire nodded. A long silence followed. Then he looked at a framed photograph on his desk. David Johnson. The man who had saved him. A quiet determination settled over him. They were getting closer. Closer to the truth. Closer to justice. Closer to the people responsible. And somewhere in the middle of it all stood Marcus. A 10-year-old boy who still had no idea how many lives were moving around him. The following week brought another surprise. One of Jae-won's investigators received an anonymous message. No name. No explanation. Only a phone number. Attached to the message was a single sentence. I have proof. The investigator immediately traced the number. The results stunned everyone. The phone belonged to Lily Bennett. 24 hours later, arrangements were made. The meeting took place in a quiet office far from the Bennett home. Lily arrived alone. She looked nervous. Scared. But determined. Minho greeted her first. You don't have to do this. Lily swallowed. I know. Are you sure? She nodded. Then she opened her backpack. The room fell silent. Hard drives. USB devices. Storage cards. Years of recordings. Years of evidence. Years of truth. Minho stared at the collection. What's all this? Lily took a deep breath. Her voice shook slightly. Everything. The investigator exchanged glances with his colleagues. Lily continued. I recorded arguments. She swallowed. Conversations. Another pause. Things my parents said when they thought nobody was listening. The room became completely silent. Everyone understood what this could mean. Evidence created by someone inside the house. Evidence impossible to dismiss as outside speculation. Evidence capable of destroying every defense the Bennetts had built. Lily looked down. Tears filled her eyes. I should have done something sooner. Nobody responded immediately. Because there was nothing to say. The weight of the moment was enormous. Eventually Minho spoke gently. You came now. Lily nodded. A tear rolled down her cheek. Marcus didn't deserve any of it. Hours later, the recordings reached Jae-won. He listened alone. One file. Then another. Then another. With each recording, his expression grew darker. The voices were unmistakable. Harold. Cynthia. Discussions about money. Discussions about foster children. Discussions about complaints. Discussions about keeping people quiet. At one point, Harold openly discussed manipulating situations to protect himself. At another, Cynthia admitted concern about investigations exposing financial misconduct. The evidence was devastating. By midnight, Jae-won removed his headphones. The room remained silent. For a long moment, he simply stared ahead. The recordings were devastating. Years of lies. Years of manipulation. Years of exploiting vulnerable children. Yet something continued bothering him. A feeling he couldn't explain. As if one final piece of the puzzle was still missing. Elsewhere, Marcus sat alone in his attic room. The silver locket rested in his hand. For weeks, he had been thinking about the strange metal lining hidden beneath the newspaper clipping. Ever since discovering his mother's message, the unusual thickness inside the locket had lingered in the back of his mind. Tonight, curiosity finally won. Marcus climbed off the bed and walked toward an old toolbox sitting near a stack of storage boxes. After a moment of searching, he found a small screwdriver. Returning to the bed, he carefully opened the locket. His heart began to race. Slowly, he pressed the tip of the screwdriver against the inner edge of the metal lining. Nothing happened. He adjusted the angle and tried again. Click. Marcus froze. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. A hidden section slowly shifted open. His eyes widened. There really was another compartment. For a moment he simply stared. Then he carefully opened it. Inside rested a small photograph. Old. Faded. Yellowed by time. Marcus gently removed it. 3 men stood together in the picture. One of them immediately caught his attention. David Johnson, his father. Marcus recognized him from the photographs investigators had recently shown him. Standing beside David was another man. Younger. Dressed in a suit. Marcus stared for several seconds before realizing who it was. Jae-won Choi. But it was the third man who confused him. He didn't recognize the face. The stranger stood between David and Jae-won, smiling, one arm resting casually on David's shoulder. Marcus turned the photograph over. Nothing was written on the back. Just an old date from more than 20 years earlier. His confusion deepened. Why would his father keep a photograph of these men hidden inside the locket? And why hide it so carefully? The next morning, Marcus brought the photograph to Jae-won. The billionaire was reviewing reports when the boy entered. Mr. Choi. Jae-won looked up. What is it? Marcus held out the photograph. I found this inside the locket. Jae-won accepted it casually. Then everything changed. The color drained from his face. His hand tightened around the photograph. For several long seconds, he couldn't speak. Marcus immediately noticed. What is it? Jae-won's eyes remained fixed on the image. His voice barely emerged. That's impossible. Marcus frowned. You know him? The billionaire slowly nodded. His gaze remained locked on the third man. A face he had not seen in decades. A face he had hoped never to see again. Victor Kong. One of the most powerful businessmen of his generation. A former business associate. A man connected to a corruption scandal that had quietly disappeared years earlier. Jae-won's expression darkened. Memories began flooding back. Missing records. Disappearing witnesses. Destroyed investigations. And one man always standing somewhere nearby. Victor Kong. Marcus stared at him. Who is he? Jae-won finally looked up. His voice was low. Controlled. Dangerously serious. A very powerful man. He glanced back at the photograph. And a very dangerous one. The room fell silent. Then another realization struck him. David Johnson. The investigation. Amina Johnson. Richard Cole. Harold Bennett. For years he had assumed they were connected. Now he was beginning to understand how. Jae-won looked directly at Marcus. His expression had changed completely. If Victor Kang is connected to this. He paused. Then everything we've uncovered so far is only part of the truth. Neither of them spoke. The photograph rested between them. A forgotten image hidden for decades. A secret preserved inside a silver locket. And perhaps the most important piece of evidence they had found yet. Because for the first time, the conspiracy surrounding Marcus's family appeared much larger than anyone imagined. The Bennetts were involved. Richard Cole was involved. But somewhere in the shadows stood a man far more powerful. A man who may have been pulling the strings from the very beginning. And now they finally had a name. Victor Kong. Across the city, the Bennetts slept peacefully. Completely unaware that their strongest protection had just collapsed. Completely unaware that one of their own children had exposed the truth. Completely unaware that the evidence now sitting in investigators' hands could destroy everything they had spent years hiding. The countdown had begun. The lies were running out of places to hide. And for the first time since Marcus entered foster care, justice was no longer a distant possibility. It was coming. Fast. And nothing would stop it. The collapse began on a Tuesday morning. At exactly 6:12 a.m., 3 vehicles pulled into the quiet street where the Bennett family lived. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Porch lights flickered on. People stepped outside. Something unusual was happening. Inside the Bennett house, Harold Bennett was still asleep when loud knocking shook the front door. His eyes snapped open. A second round of knocking followed. Harder this time. More authoritative. Harold sat up immediately. Cynthia appeared in the hallway moments later. What is that? Before either could answer, a voice thundered from outside. Open the door. Harold's stomach dropped. He recognized the tone. Law enforcement. The moment he opened the door, his world began falling apart. Investigators entered. Officials followed. Documents were presented. Search warrants. Financial records. Electronic evidence. Witness statements. The evidence gathered over months had finally reached its destination. The system that had ignored children for years was finally paying attention. And it was paying attention because the truth had become impossible to ignore. Marcus stood near the staircase, confused and frightened. He watched adults move throughout the house. He watched Harold's face lose color. He watched Cynthia begin to cry. Nobody explained anything. Nobody needed to. The atmosphere itself explained everything. The Bennetts were no longer in control. For years they had controlled the narrative. For years they had controlled the children. For years they had controlled the truth. Not anymore. By midday, news had spread throughout the town. Reporters arrived. Camera crews appeared. Social media exploded with speculation. People who had praised the Bennetts suddenly distanced themselves. Community leaders issued statements. Former foster children began speaking publicly. And one story after another painted the same disturbing picture. A household built on exploitation. A family that treated vulnerable children as a source of income. A system that failed to protect those who needed protection most. Meanwhile, Harold Bennett sat across from investigators. The confidence that once defined him had vanished. Every explanation collided with evidence. Every denial collided with testimony. Every lie collided with recordings. Especially the recordings. Lily's recordings. The conversations he never thought anyone would hear. The admissions he never expected anyone to preserve. The arrogance he never imagined would return to haunt him. One by one, the walls collapsed. And eventually, there was nowhere left to run. Across town, Jae-won stood inside a conference room watching updates arrive in real time. Minho entered carrying the latest report. "It's happening." Jae-won nodded. "How bad?" The investigator almost laughed. "Bad for them." The billionaire accepted the folder. Several charges were already being prepared. Additional investigations were expanding. Financial crimes, child welfare violations, fraud-related offenses, potential conspiracy charges. The scope continued growing. Jae-won closed the file. Not with satisfaction. Not with celebration. With resolve. Because one battle remained unfinished. Marcus and Amina. The mother and son still separated by a lie. A lie that had stolen years from both of them. A lie that now stood on increasingly fragile ground. The legal challenge to Amina Johnson's conviction moved quickly. Faster than most expected. Because the evidence was overwhelming. Documents previously hidden had resurfaced. Witness statements contradicted original testimony. Financial records revealed suspicious patterns. And at the center of everything stood Richard Cole, the attorney who had spent years presenting himself as a respected legal professional. Now he faced questions he could not easily answer. Why had evidence disappeared? Why had key information been withheld? Why were financial transactions connected to individuals involved in the case? Every answer created more problems. Every explanation created more suspicion. The pressure became relentless. News organizations began covering the story nationally. Legal experts weighed in. Former colleagues distanced themselves. The reputation Richard Cole had spent decades building started crumbling in public. And unlike money, influence, or status, trust is difficult to rebuild once it breaks. Several weeks later, the hearing finally arrived. The courtroom overflowed with people. Journalists, observers, attorneys, advocates. Everyone wanted to witness what happened next. Marcus sat quietly beside Jae-won. The boy wore a suit for the first time in his life. He felt uncomfortable, nervous, excited, terrified. Every emotion seemed to exist at once. Jae-won noticed. "You okay?" Marcus nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. The billionaire smiled slightly. "That's normal." Marcus stared toward the courtroom doors. "Do you think she'll come?" Jae-won already knew the answer, but he understood why Marcus asked. Hope can be frightening when you've spent years without it. "Yes," Jae-won said softly. "I think she will." The hearing began. Hours passed. Evidence was presented. Arguments were made. Witnesses testified. The truth unfolded piece by piece. But this time, the story went far beyond a wrongful conviction. Investigators had spent weeks tracing the mysterious photograph discovered inside Marcus's locket. What they uncovered shocked everyone involved. Corporate records dating back more than 20 years revealed a hidden network of financial crimes connected to Victor King and several powerful associates. Long before Marcus was born, David Johnson had stumbled upon evidence exposing the operation. According to recovered records, David had quietly gathered information linking Victor King to illegal financial schemes worth millions. He intended to expose everything. But before he could make the information public, evidence began disappearing. Critical records vanished. Witnesses suddenly became unavailable. Investigations stalled without explanation. Every trail eventually led back to the same powerful people. Then David Johnson died unexpectedly, taking many of his answers with him. For years, the truth remained buried, until investigators discovered something even more disturbing. Years later, Amina Johnson unknowingly gained access to information connected to the same network. She didn't realize what she had found. But Victor King did. The evidence presented in court revealed that Amina had become a threat to people she never even knew existed. A threat that needed to be silenced. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as investigators explained how the conspiracy unfolded. Financial records, internal communications, recovered documents, witness testimony. Every piece pointed in the same direction. Victor King had used his influence to protect the network. Richard Cole had been recruited to help secure Amina's conviction. Evidence had been manipulated. Critical information had been withheld. The legal process itself had been weaponized. Harold Bennett's role became clearer as well. Records showed that individuals connected to the network benefited from foster care placements and related financial arrangements after Amina's imprisonment. The conspiracy stretched far beyond one lawyer, far beyond one foster family. It was a chain of corruption spanning decades. And the photograph hidden inside Marcus's locket became one of the most important pieces connecting every major player. For years it had remained hidden, waiting, protected by David Johnson as a final safeguard in case the truth ever needed to be uncovered. Then came the final revelation. Only days before the hearing, authorities arrested Victor King. The arrest triggered a cascade of new evidence. Corporate archives were seized. Financial records were recovered. Former associates began cooperating. The wall of silence that had protected the conspiracy for decades finally collapsed. Victor King's testimony, combined with the mountain of evidence recovered after his arrest, exposed the full scheme. By the time proceedings concluded, the facts were undeniable. Amina Johnson had never received a fair trial. Her conviction had been built upon manipulation, withheld evidence, and corruption reaching far beyond anything anyone originally suspected. The courtroom sat in complete silence. Because what had begun as a foster care investigation had uncovered a decades-long conspiracy. And at its center stood the truth David Johnson had tried to protect all those years ago. When the decision finally came, the courtroom held its breath. The judge's words seemed to echo forever. Based upon the evidence presented, Marcus gripped the edge of his seat. This court finds sufficient grounds to overturn the conviction. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The words needed time to settle. Then reality arrived. The conviction was gone. The lie was gone. The prison sentence was gone. The nightmare was over. Marcus felt tears filling his eyes before he even realized he was crying. Beside him, J1 quietly looked away. Not because he wasn't emotional. Because he was. Very emotional. 20 years earlier, David Johnson had pulled him from a burning vehicle. Today, in some small way, J1 had finally honored that debt. But the most important moment still remained. 3 days later, Marcus stood outside a correctional facility. The morning air felt unusually calm. Birds chirped nearby. Cars passed in the distance. Everything seemed ordinary. Except nothing felt ordinary to Marcus. His hands trembled. His heart pounded. Every few seconds he looked toward the gate. Then looked again. Then again. Beside him stood J1. Several attorneys. A few supporters. And a woman clutching tissues. One of the advocates who had worked on Amina's case. Everyone waited. Then the gate opened. Marcus stopped breathing. A woman stepped outside. Older than the photograph inside the locket. Older than the memories he barely remembered. But still unmistakably her. Amina Johnson. For a moment she simply stood there. Looking. Searching. Then her eyes found him. Everything else disappeared. The reporters. The cameras. The advocates. The world. Nothing mattered. Only Marcus. Tears immediately filled Amina's eyes. Her hand rose to her mouth. Marcus. The boy's composure shattered instantly. Mom. He ran. She ran. And a lifetime of separation vanished in seconds. They collided in a fierce embrace. Neither wanted to let go. Years of pain poured out through tears. Years of loneliness. Years of unanswered questions. Years of stolen time. People around them cried openly. Even some reporters wiped away tears. Because moments like this are rare. Moments where truth actually wins. Moments where broken things become whole again. Eventually Amina pulled back just enough to touch her son's face. I never stopped looking for you. Marcus cried harder. I know. She stared at him, memorizing every detail, every expression, every feature. The child she had lost. The child she had fought to return to. And finally, the child she had found again. Several months later, another crowd gathered. But this time, the atmosphere was entirely different. There were no courtrooms, no investigations, no accusations, only hope. A large sign stood near the entrance of a newly opened building, the David Johnson Foundation. Marcus stared at the name proudly. Beside him stood Amina. And beside her stood Jae-won Choi. The billionaire stepped toward the podium. Hundreds of guests watched. Children, families, community leaders, supporters, people whose lives would soon benefit from the foundation's work. Jae-won smiled. Many years ago, a man named David Johnson saved my life. The audience listened quietly. He never asked for recognition. He never asked for payment. He simply helped someone in need. Jae-won's voice softened. This foundation exists because compassion matters. Applause filled the air. But Jae-won wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at Marcus. Because Marcus represented everything his father stood for. Kindness, strength, courage, hope. 1 year later, Marcus sat at a dining table inside a real home. Not a foster house. Not an attic room. A real home. Laughter filled the kitchen. Amina prepared dinner while sharing stories. Friends visited regularly. School had improved. Life had improved. Everything had improved. The silver locket still hung around Marcus's neck. But now it meant something different. Not loss. Not abandonment. Not mystery. Family. After dinner, Marcus walked toward the living room wall. A framed photograph hung there. In the picture stood David Johnson, Amina Johnson, Marcus, and Jae-won. A family connected by sacrifice, by truth, by destiny. Marcus touched the locket and smiled. Years earlier, people had treated him like a servant. Like he didn't matter. Like nobody would ever fight for him. They were wrong. Because the truth had finally been revealed. His mother had never abandoned him. His father had been a hero. And despite everything he endured, Marcus Johnson was finally home. Free. Loved. And exactly where he belonged. Thank you for watching this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends and family so more people can experience these unforgettable stories. Also, let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Marcus's situation? Your support inspires us to create even more emotional and cinematic stories for you.